Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And we're the hosts of the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, where we bring you stories that delve into the science and spirit behind intriguing people doing extraordinary things.
Welcome to the Chasing Tomorrow podcast. This week it's episode 41. This week we have Dane Rauschenberg on the call. Dane is an American long-distance runner, author and attorney who ran 52 marathons, one every weekend, for an entire year and raised over $43,000 for charity in doing so. Dane has also run in 12 hours, 84 miles, which is a big number. Dane also ran up the coast of Oregon, which is roughly 350 miles in 7 days. And by doing so, set the FKT. So Dane is an incredible guy that I can't wait to dig in a little bit more and find out more about this guy. So welcome to the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, Dane.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Dane, great to hook up. We're starting to get into some of the long distance stuff a little bit before the hullabaloo of what's been going on lately with attention in ultramarathoning world. And so, maybe we spin back a little bit and start earlier than that even. We always love to get a little bit of the early story. Were you a high school track runner? Did you run in college, or did you find, running later in your life? And then we'll want to dig in a little bit to what's the motivation behind, want to run a marathon a week. Everyone likes one marathon in a year. And I do think the first time I ever met a marathoner, like after the day, they couldn't walk. And it seems like a lot has changed since then. But why don't we start at the beginning and tell us a little about yourself?
No, I agree. A lot has changed. It's really interesting. Just even in the, I feel like I've only been running for a short period of time, but I guess this year actually be my 20th anniversary of my first marathon. So I keep thinking that I'm a young guy, and then I remember that I'm not. So, but yeah, I ran track in high school, but I didn't start till my junior year. I was a pretty accomplished swimmer and played a little bit of football as well. That was my favorite sport. But it was just my junior year. I had nothing going on in the spring, and my mom simply suggested that maybe I should run track just to stay out of trouble. And so I joined the track team, and I had a decent high school career. I ran a 450 mile and a 205 800, but it was really easy to stay humble. Even on my tiny high school team, we were a town of 5,000 people in northwestern Pennsylvania. We had the 2 mile state champion on our team, as well as like some really good runners. Like my 450 mile was like maybe fourth best on the team. So it was really easy to think that 450 was scrubs, because it was even on our own team.
Yeah.
And so that's where it started. So I didn't come from nowhere for running, but once I left high school, I was like, well, now you're done running. What else, you become an adult, it wasn't this proliferation of running out there. So I just kind of, I went to college and I put on a little bit of weight because I played rugby. And so I was a 235 pound rugby player during college years. So the running was punishment. You hear that all the time as a joke, but that was what we did. Go run a lap. You drop a pass, you run a lap. So that's where it started out.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think that there's a lot of us who do get that early start, but it doesn't continue. And so then time goes by, and then, you're going to find running somehow. So like, what was it that got that first marathon going?
I was in law school, and I had wanted to lose that excess weight that I gained in college. And the easiest way that I knew how was swimming, because that's what I always fell back on. But as any swimmer will tell you, finding an open pool is infinitely more difficult than finding an open run or an open road for the run. And that's exactly what happened. I had a friend who said, why don't you go for a run with me? And I think we went and did like 4 or 5 miles in my first ever run. And I was just completely devastated. I was like, I couldn't make it home. And that's kind of where it started. And so she was training for the Boston Marathon. And so I had someone to do some kind of training with. But then I fell off a little bit. And my longest run I think I ever did before my first marathon was 16 miles. but I thought that was enough. I thought, yeah, I'm fine. And it was enough for the first half of the marathon. And then the second half fell apart. So I ran a 1:29 for the first half and then a 2:43 for the second half.
Wow.
So, yeah, I wouldn't call that any sort of running. There was a lot of walking in the second half. And
absolutely. But
I was
but
one
yeah,
of
it's
those
getting
people
through
that you
it, right?
mentioned, Joe, that couldn't walk the next day after that
Mm.
first marathon.
Absolutely. So the beginning of your running, it sounded like you were, hey, I want to lose some excess weight. You wanted to get in some cardio. We all know cardio is king. But like many people that we've talked to on this podcast, it normally doesn't always start off as easy as it is now. Why did you get out for the second run, the 10th run, the 15th run? What was motivating you at that point? Was it a certain drive that you end up feeling as a child, or was there always like I'm not going to quit type of attitude?
It's funny is because you hear people say that they're never going to run another marathon again. And then like 2 weeks later, they've signed up for it. And I wasn't one of those people. I didn't run, my next marathon wasn't for 2 more years. I finished up law school. I was like, okay, marathoning was done. I wasn't going to do another one. I had done one. I had beat Oprah's time. That's all that mattered to me. So, and I was clerking for a judge after law school, who was a young, not relatively fit. He was a very fit man, and he was training for some races. And he kind of said, "Well, I think you've got another race under your belt you would improve your PR." And so it was kind of more or less, he kind of pushed me into training for another marathon. And that one went much better than the first one. But again, I wasn't sold on marathon. It wasn't till I moved down to DC and got caught up in the Marine Corps marathon hoopla. And DC is a great running city if you've never spent any time there. There are so many running clubs, and I just kind of got swept up in it a little bit. And it was from there, like a year and a half later, I was planning the 52 marathons. So it just went full gangbusters out of the gate. So I'd only had run 6 marathons when I decided to do 52 in a year.
That's pretty cool. What I found in my marathon running, and I haven't done as many as you, I did like 1 year, I did one a month and that kind of thing. But there was a transition when I was where you were running marathons to a marathon runner, where you actually really fully had a good sense of what the feeling was like, the distances were like, you really could plot it out. Did you start to find that as you went through the 52, where this was like, not just going to run a marathon, but you could qualify yourself that way?
Yeah, I from the get-go, my goal with running the 52 marathons was not simply just to show up and finish them. Any marathon is tough to finish, period. Like it doesn't matter if you run 1 or 175, you still have 26.2 miles to run. But the year prior to the 52, I had run 6 marathons. So when I started, I had 12 under my belt. And I thought, okay, I know I can finish a marathon. I want to see how fast I can run these. I want to push myself, not only just with the 52, but as hard as possible. So my goal was to try to get them all under 4 hours, which I thought was pretty auspicious. I thought. Then by the end of the first month, I thought, there's no way I want to be out here running 3:35 marathons. And so I started picking up the pace with the eyes on the prize of making sure I stayed healthy enough to run all 52. And by May, I was running like 3:13s and stuff like that. And then by the end of the year, my 42nd marathon of the year, for example, was my first ever sub 3-hour marathon. So when people say, how do you run a sub 3? I say, well, first run 41 in a row. And then magically that 42nd one will be sub 3. That's just the way to do it.
That fitness builds. In 2018, I tried to run across Canada in record time. And that was my experience too, is that, the only way to really get ready for the second week is to do the first week. And the best thing about the third week is that it's going to be easier than the second week. And your fitness builds. So did you feel that with the 52 marathons week after week? Did you feel that the fitness was building from week to week?
it mind-bogglingly so. I mean, I love, we're runners, we love stats. I won't bore you with too many, but I averaged a 3:29 for the first 26. And that's actually a little bit slower because Leadville was one of the first 26. So that skewed the average a bit. But the last 26 I averaged I think it was a 3:18, and the last 13, I averaged a 3:10. So I basically qualified for Boston the last 25% of the marathons. And on very little running too. Like for example, in November, I only ran 4 2-mile runs the day after the marathon, other than the marathon, but I averaged a 3:10 for that entire month. And so you're right. It was the muscle was getting stronger. And I know that not everybody can do that. I mean, but I think you're right that the more you train like that, the more the muscle memory remembers, and you can do some amazing things that you just didn't think were possible.
So just to be clear,
I've always thought that there was,
the week in between, you weren't training a lot. You were really just using the weekend run to really be the mileage for the week.
Exactly. I averaged only 10 miles of running per week for the entire year, other than the marathon. It was 1,362 miles of marathons and then 400 miles total other running the rest of the year. And yeah, it was, I mean, back then, I mean, 2006 wasn't the Stone Ages, but I couldn't find much information on how to do something like this. So I was kind of writing the book myself and experimenting, and definitely afraid of any type of injury, because my biggest goal, other than running fast, was I absolutely had to run one marathon every weekend. I couldn't take off a break and then do like the Tahoe triple or anything like that. And it was being there and showing up every 7 days and finishing that marathon. So that was the most important thing. I see lots of people doing really cool things, and they set out to do them, and as say injuries come up or things get in the way, they change their goal. And that always bothers me. Just admit that it didn't work out. Life doesn't work out a lot. And I mean, since that time, every time I can't even imagine like last year being 2 months into trying to run the marathon every weekend, and all of a sudden a pandemic hits. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden your entire plan is thrown away. And that's life, is things get screwed up. And so I wanted to stay as healthy as possible, but it really produced results that I didn't think were things that you could do.
Well, I think that's it too, is sometimes the goal is to show up on race day as fit as you can. So, sorry, not as fit as you can, as healthy as you can. And so was that your goal after, let's say you did your marathon on Saturday? Was that your goal starting on Sunday morning to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, was to recover, get treatment, roll out, stretch, do all those things that you need to do? And then secondly, what did that look like? What did that look like throughout the week when it came to recovery?
My weeks, so there were 39 marathons that were on a Sunday and 13 that were on a Saturday. And so that kind of skewed the days a little bit. But almost every week I did a 2-mile shakeout run the day after the marathon. And it was usually like molasses. It was just like so slow and creaky. And then usually I did a slowish track workout with my running club. And I would do that on a Tuesday. Then I usually take Wednesday off. Then Thursday was like a 4 to 5 mile run. And then Friday was either a day off or a travel day. And then it was lather, rinse, repeat every week. And, I say this because it does matter, is I was working a full-time job while I was doing this as well. So I was, having to fit that in and sitting at an office desk, 40 hours a week. So if I were to do it again, if I were like somehow have all the knowledge that I have now, I think I would have probably done a lot of things differently back then. But it's hard to argue with the results. I mean, it was far more incredible than I could have ever thought that it would have gone. I mean, for someone I'm moderately talented, and I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'1", 180 something pounds. And so to average basically a 3:21 marathon, 52 in a row, I think I did everything just about as possibly right as I could have.
Yeah, I think, so no, I think, Dane, what's cool about it for our listeners, I think each of us have had this experience, which is we can create in our minds the obstacle to these ideas and find all the reasons why it wouldn't work. Like the logic of it doesn't seem to make sense, that you would get stronger after 3 weeks of running every day, or week 30 you'd get faster, or like we'd always be like, oh no, I'm going to be too tired. I did this 6 marathons on 6 continents a number of years ago in 6 days. And in my training, I had to run after the day after the marathon. I had to go run another 20 miles. People are like, well, aren't you taking the day off? I'm like, well, if I can't do it during my training, like, how could I possibly go and just do this? And
Mhm.
and if you're smart, which you seem to have been, and you're taking care of yourself, the body does respond very well to this. And so I think we have that as a proof point. What's interesting to think about, though, is once you establish this lifestyle of doing a marathon every week, what was it like when you were done? Like, how did that play out?
Mhm.
Like that next month, you're like, what am I doing sitting here?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. In fact, I started the entire year off at the Disney Marathon. Uh,
Yep, I've
and
done
I
it. It's
did,
fun.
yeah, and I did the half marathon the day before the marathon. So I started the 52 actually by doing the half first. And Disney was really nice to me. I was a nobody. This was their Disney, and they were really kind to me. They gave me my very first at 52. They gave me some stage on their speech. I'm sorry, some space on their stage to give a speech about what I was doing, which I was like, why would they do that? I haven't done anything yet. I haven't accomplished anything. And they actually invited me back the next year. And I said, I can't, because if I keep going, I don't know if I will stop. Like, because I would have rolled right into the next year. And so I said, I have to take this break, because otherwise I'm going to want to keep another 52 in a row.
Right.
And so it was a challenge to force myself to rest and recover. But that's one thing that I have coached myself and I coach my athletes in, is sometimes the best run you do is the one you don't. And that is, taking that time off and letting your body recover. And so it was a weird year, the year after the 52. I ran my first 100-mile attempt. But other than that, just a handful of races. It was almost as if I hadn't done the 52. It was really an interesting year. I had a lot of life changes that year. I changed jobs and I moved out to Utah and all this stuff. So there was a lot of turmoil, not in a bad way, but you nailed it. It was an odd occurrence.
Yeah, but back to you saying that why did Disney give you that spot in order for you to to present and give a speech and things. I think the answer is simply because you're courageous. Joe has got a saying that he said on the podcast a number of times, where excellence is found at the crossroads of curiosity and courage. And I think in order to say, okay, I'm going to run a marathon every week for an entire year, in order to put that out there, you're kind of putting it on the line. And even if you were to crash and burn, I think there does need to be a lot of reverence given to that level of courage. Have you always been pretty courageous when it comes to setting goals?
I've been almost. I've always been. Yeah, I guess I have. I don't know if I say it's courageous as much as just a lot of faith in what I can do, and that's usually based on experience. And some people say it's cocky. I just think it's confidence that's based on past experience. And in looking back, my first ever ultra was just 1 month after I did my second marathon. And that was when I ran the 84 miles in 12 hours. And when I did that, it was, ultras were, again, this wasn't 1975, but 2003, ultras were not where they are today by any stretch of the imagination. And when I ran the 84 miles on that, it was a 1 mile loop in a 12-hour race up at Erie, Pennsylvania. They told me I broke the course record, which I was like, okay, that's cool. That makes me happy. I didn't realize that it hadn't been broken in like 22 years and no one's come close since on this particular course. I just thought that I had done something really, well. And so even going into the 52 marathons, I relied a little bit on my ultra my ultra win, but I was like, okay, well, if I can do this, I can do other things. And so it was really just, go out there. I don't mind failing. It's something that I think a lot of people, I see a lot of people taking on adventures, and they hedge their bets on what they're doing. They don't, I love when people put out their goal and they fail. I love that when they're like, I'm going to do 165 miles in 24 hours. And then they pull their hamstring at mile 74. It's like, yeah, but you know what? You told everyone what you were going to try to do. You didn't keep it secret, and then, hedge your bets later. So that I really have appreciated that, and all the people that I've met in the distance world or endurance world who put out their goals like that. I think it's something that's courage, because it's really hard to do that.
So let's talk about that 84 miles. Was that, did you put that number out there, or did you have a sense of what you could do in 12 hours, or you just like all, bets off and just go run?
I was absolutely ignorant of what I could accomplish that day. It was absolutely, in hindsight, it was the perfect weather day for me, which I have learned. I am very susceptible to the weather. It's something that I dislike about myself, but the weather really affects my performance. It's why I don't have all that many ultra finishes, like 25 or 26. It's really not a ton. And it's because I've learned that if I'm not going to get weather that's suitable to me, it's going to be bad. So, because I have Gilbert syndrome, which is a liver disorder that makes it difficult to recover from strenuous activity. Now, I didn't know that till almost a decade after I ran the 52 marathons, but in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense now. So the long-winded answer to your question is, I went into that race. It was about 40 to 45 degrees. It was overcast. It was chilly. It wasn't humid. It was what I've learned is perfect for my body. And so, I had no eating strategy. I had no idea. I had a Ford Probe. That was my car, a hatchback. I parked it backwards. I had Cheez-Its, grapes, and Oreo cookies with Gatorade in the back. And I would just grab what I thought was necessary and I just kept running. I had no idea what was it. I think it's hard to remember exactly, but I think I vaguely recall thinking that 100 miles in 12 hours would be good. So for some reason, my 84 seemed completely in line with what I thought that I could do. I was like, 100 would be good. So 84 is not too shabby. So I had no idea what the record was. It's funny is the race actually downplays its record keeping, which I've always found a little bit interesting. They call it a fun run or a non-competitive run. And I don't know why they do that, because you have a clock running and you're keeping track of the miles. It's competitive as far as I'm concerned. But so it wasn't something that I was really paying that much attention to. I just went out there and just I have crash or burn or fantastic days in my running career. And this was one of those absolute fantastic days.
That's amazing. And so during that race, did you kind of fall in love with timed events? When it comes to 6 hour, 12 hour, 24 hour events, timed events, is that your kind of go-to now?
It's funny is when I was looking at something, like I said, I've only run like 25 ultras, and there's times where I'm surprised how few races I've done in certain areas. I don't really love anything. I like them all, and I'm talking not just like I do triathlons, I do aquathlons, I do swimming races, I do obstacle course races, and I think it comes from the fact that I realize that I'm not that great at anything. I'm pretty good at a lot of things. And so instead of just beating my head against the wall and never being particularly good, I've accepted that and be like, okay, well, let's just be good in whatever race pops up, and my 50K and my 5K PRs were set in the same month a few years ago. And that's just kind of how I run. Is I just, I see these, some of the ultra runners out there now, and the races they do month after month, it just boggles my mind, and the mileage that they put in, because I'm not a high mileage trainer. I'm not, I've never been, and I don't know if my body could handle it. And so I love that when people get totally into one type of race and they make it their life. It's just nothing that I've ever done. I do like timed races. I do like loops. Most people hate loops. I love a loop. I ran a marathon around a cruise ship twice. So I love loops. I just think it's a way. I listened to Bob Hearn's podcast that you guys did, and how he likes to just break it down into 2 minutes per loop. And it's just, he's right. It's so simple. You don't have to do anything, but just this loop, this loop. Yeah.
Well, I think that's true. There are so many fun things to do. It's like, I look at my season. I'm going to be, in another month and a bit, I'm going to be running an FKT. It's 333 miles across the province. And then, a little bit after that, I'm doing a track 24-hour race, and then I'm going to go do a trail 100-miler, and then I'm going to go do a bigs. Backyard style race. And so, there's so many things in the ultra running world, and the running world really, even, 5Ks are fun. But there's just so much variety. So
that's a lie. 5Ks are not fun.
Like variety is kind of the spice for you.
He said 5Ks aren't fun, but
I couldn't agree with you. Yeah, 5Ks are not fun. Yeah. They're fun when you're done, and you're done pretty quick. But, yeah, no, absolutely. But variety is a spice of life for you. You like doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm actually. I mean, if you just put the times in a spreadsheet, I'm a better swimmer than I am a runner. And so there's aquathlons out there, which are the swim runs, but they are almost always sprints, and I'm not a sprinter. The longest one I've ever seen is a 15K run, and then like a mile swim, and those are few and far between. But that's right about where I would actually start to be pretty competitive. I qualified for the World Championships in the aquathlon a couple of times, but I think that I say that simply. I say never apologize for your competition, but I will say I think the competition is a lot lesser in those type of races. But I'm not a sprinter, and so when it's a 5K run, I'm like, that's my warm up, and I can't even really get my muscles warmed up till then. But I would love if there were more, 20K runs with a mile swim on them. I think that I would actually start to be, I don't want to say world class, but maybe national class, because I combine those two skills particularly well. And so I would love to do those. But yeah, anytime anyone mentions any race ever, I'm almost always like, yeah, that sounds fun. I'd like to do that. It doesn't matter what the distance is, or I'm like, let's do that. That sounds good.
And I think that's a great attitude, Dane. And, I think if we were looking at all the guests we've seen over the year, I don't know if they'd characterize it the same way, but it's a little bit like, hey, Dave, want to come out and play? And we're like, yeah, let's go do something. It's the being active, right? I mean, we do have a lot of very talented people on the podcast, but it isn't, but they're humble. They're not trying to count and say, oh, I'm better, but they do love being in motion, right? That's what we find, is that this system that we run, who we are is capable of that, beyond what you would imagine. I mean, we're designed, we talked to Johann Steen last week, and he said he was influenced by, Born to Run. And in the Born to Run book, we compare against how come we're better hunters in an endurance world than an animal is. And we've been designed to move. And when we don't move, I think we get fussy. But when we move, and, we'd love to encourage you. What's fun listening to you is, everyone on this might think, oh, well, all I have to do is run. But no, obstacle course races are great. We had a couple of former champions on who do OCR stuff. And then there are these combinations, and swimming is a phenomenal sport for motion. And we haven't even really talked cycling, which is another way to get out and move around with triathlons. So as you coach some of the, your people in your team, like, what is it that you try and encourage them to do? What is your style of coaching? And maybe some of our listeners can benefit from some of what you've learned.
What I try to do with my coaching is I really get to know, I don't have a vast volume of athletes, it's 20 at most. And it's all virtual. It's all, it's across the country, across the world. Actually, I have some athletes in Europe. And what I really get to know them on a personal level and then I see what they're racing, and I try to think what I would do if I was training for that race and I was at their fitness level. And so I really, sit down and I just, put my mindset into theirs and just try to encourage them to realize, just first and foremost, how lucky they are that they get to run. And that seems like a frou-frou type of thing, but goes back to the humility of our sport. In any sport, honestly, that has a clock, because it's really easy to realize that no matter how fast you run, you will never beat the clock. And unless you run 0 minutes and 0 seconds, you can still go faster. And so it's more about just pushing yourself to be better than you were yesterday. And if you aren't better than you were yesterday, that's okay. Maybe you'll be better tomorrow. And, and there's ups and downs. And, now that I've been running for 20 years, it's really interesting to remember talks that I had with people who had been running for 20 years when I first started, and how they had so many ups and downs. They're like, yeah, I had 3 years where I didn't have a good race, and then all of a sudden I popped out a 10K PR at age 42 or something. They're like, I have no idea why. And that has always given me hope when I've gone through stretches where it's just like, all right, well, I'm rapidly approaching 45. Maybe my PR days in the shorter distances at the least are behind me. And then I go and I have a run in the middle, on the Tuesday, and I run like, a 6:55 pace for 10 miles. I'm like, wait a minute, that shouldn't have happened, So it's just all about just enjoying how lucky we are to be out there and be able to do this. My father was crippled in a hunting accident right before I was born. And he passed away a few years ago from Alzheimer's, but in the entirety of my life, I never saw him, walk. I mean, a little bit, and so I'm not sitting here saying that like, I think about him every day and how lucky I am that I get to run. That would be false. I don't do that. But without a doubt, it pops in my head every once in a while, when you complain about, oh, I have to go do 20 miles today. I always say, no, you don't. You don't have to. You get to. This is a treat that you get.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so it sounds like gratitude is a major place. It holds a major place in you and with your racing and your coaching and your training and on and so forth. And what I love about the Chasing Tomorrow podcast that Joe and I have been able to explore this last year is like, I know next week's broadcast is with Robbie Britton, and I know exactly what his kind of main drive is and why he's able to succeed. And I think that, all of our listeners need to listen next week, because it's going to be a really great conversation. But, a couple of weeks ago, we had Johan Steen on, and, he's just so exploratory. He's always wondering, what's the depth of potential? And he's never hit it, and he's always so curious of what that looks like. Courtney DeWalter was on, Maggie, who ended up winning bigs last year. We've had some really incredible people coming on talking about their little nuggets. And what I always find is that with all of these guests, including yourself, Dane, is that there's always one nugget. There's always something that you're always circling around, trying to find, the why and the who and how, and kind of find your excellence around that one little nugget. Would you say that that's gratitude, or am I a bit off? Is there something else there?
No, I think that's, I hadn't given that much thought, but it sounds, pretty spot on. I've been toying around with writing this article for years about pride, and it's been really cognizant, or really in my forefront of my mind, because I live in Texas now, and Texans really love Texas. If there's one thing they love, is they love themselves. And it always makes me laugh because it's a huge state, and Amarillo has absolutely nothing to do with Houston. And but they love being Texans. So I've thought about, I'm happy that I did the 52 marathons and I've been able to do what I've done. But for the most part, I've realized that, yes, I worked hard, but if I didn't have the DNA to do it, it doesn't matter how hard you work out. You can't beat your DNA. And so I guess it really is a sort of gratitude type thing. I've always thought, it's like, I'm not proud of anything. Because I really don't believe that I have much of skin in the game. It was the DNA dice that came down. And yeah, I have to work hard. I have to do with what I do with it. But so I guess it really is just gratitude that I have what I have. You know, I've got both my legs. Not that you need both your legs to run. I have plenty of friends who've lost a limb who still go out there and do that. But the fact that I have good health, that I have never had an injury that has sidelined me, or all those things, I mean, you really have put it into a nutshell. It is gratitude. It's just pure happiness that, yeah, you might go out and go for a run and feel like crap, but you still got to go out and feel like crap. And that's a pretty cool thing to have.
Yeah, I think you're underplaying a little bit of how much you've realized with the potential that you have. And so I think the gratitude comes from the acknowledgement inside. And, you know, I think Johan touched on this a little bit. You know, we're all sort of in desperate search of answering the mystery of life. And sometimes these activities get us closer to understanding, you know, sort of what is, if there was a responsibility that we have, you know, other than treating other people well, the responsibility to ourselves is to sort of leverage the resource that you have, whatever it can do. Doesn't matter. Like, we don't need to, a coal miner, a marathon runner, you know, public office, doesn't matter which one. It's just using those resources. And you've decided to do that. We haven't even talked about the books that you've written, the speaking that you do. You're a lawyer. You're doing this, and so you don't have any privilege over anyone, right? None of us do. It's only earned. That's what we earn in our lives by what we choose. And you've been very explicit about that throughout your life. And I think that that's, you serve as a good role model when you do that, even if you're humble about it. You know, we know that the best in the world are deeply humble, you know, because they look inside and just see a regular person, and outside it might come across differently. So one thing, though, that I think how that works is how you use your time really matters. Clearly, if you're going to do as much as you've done, whether it is those 52 marathons or writing, I don't know, is it 5 books you've written? And you find a good way to use your time. Do you think that's another one of your core sort of strengths? Because, and focus, right? Focus on an outcome, use your time, create some good outcomes.
Well, it's funny you say that, because as I mentioned earlier, I was surprised how few ultras that I've run. So I feel like I sometimes haven't used my time the best I could have. And but then I realized I've run 165 marathons. I've run over 100 half marathons. There are only so many weekends in one's life. And so I just happened to do those to start off with. And that's what I like about ultras. I mean, 45 to me feels old, but I think I'm kind of, you know, I've got what, 30 more years of running ultras, you know, and maybe breaking times down there. Maybe I won't break my 5K PR anymore, but yeah, it's kind of funny. I think it's the fact that I feel like that I don't spend my time properly, that maybe to everyone else I do spend it properly, because I'm always feeling like I've got a stack of books that I'm reading, and I always feel like I'm not reading them fast enough. You know, I remember watching The Matrix back in the day when he plugged in and goes, "I know Kung Fu." And I was like, oh my God, that would be awesome if you could just immediately have information, you know? And so it's just wanting to do everything that I possibly can with every single second, and being, you know, that's why this past year with this pandemic has just been, it's not been fun for me at all. And I've been healthy. And so obviously some people have been hurt way more, but it's like, I had all these great experiences planned. I haven't traveled to Europe that much, and was going to run around Loch Ness. It was an 80-mile race around Loch Ness. Then like 2 weeks later, or maybe it was the next week, I was going to run a marathon in Liechtenstein, which is hilarious because Liechtenstein's only 13 miles long. So there's that. And then I was going to run across the, I'm going to probably mispronounce it, but I think it's the Malo Viaduct. It's a bridge in France. It's the highest bridge in the world. And that race is only run every other year because it's hard to shut down. And all 3 of those were canceled. And I'm just like, so now in my mind, I'm like, I just lost a year. I just lost, you know, and so I'm always trying to to use my time properly, and from writing the books to speaking to people, and realizing that I've created a platform through what I've done that makes me a little bit more recognizable than more accomplished runners. But I want to. I'm not going to bemoan that I've been given that platform. I'm going to use it the best I can to try to inspire other people.
When I was trying to name the title of my book, and I've only written one, it was going to be Always Happy, Never Satisfied.
Oh,
And I think that sounds like Dane to me, so the satisfied is about our performance and really using our system to the best degree possible. The happiness is intrinsic about how we feel about ourselves. And we should always, I say, look, you can allow yourself 24 bad hours, but no longer than that. We have to move out of that state, because happiness is up to us. And even in a tough circumstance, but satisfied is about performance. And so, we're always careful about that, because others are working at their level of performance and they don't have to be satisfied. So your numbers are big. There aren't a lot of people who would put up that many big numbers, and you do have a lot of life left. I might even offer you might have 40 or 50 years, depending on how health care evolves over time, and dialing in some of the things that we're going to be able to do for ourselves. But I think that, having that attitude is really important in creating community of people who are there to help and support each other, is a critical part of that, which is why it's nice what you share, whether from the stage or privately with the coaching. If you were looking back at, some of what you've written, or is trying to communicate something, what's the theme across your books that we can take away from there?
Well, my most recent book was my first one that was not running centric. It was more inspirational and motivational, and I really think that sums it up. And it's entitled "Ignore the Impossible," and that's become kind of, well, I don't want to say it's become my theme. It was funny, as I was looking back through some old blog posts and stuff, and I was saying it like in 2008. I was like, oh wow, I haven't had an original idea in 13 years. So I think that's what it is. It's to realize that I don't agree that you can accomplish anything. I'm a realist. I'm like, there's a lot of things you can't accomplish, but you don't know what they are until you repeatedly try and try and try and try. And so you might as well just ignore what is impossible, because honestly, to run 52 marathons in a row after barely training for more than a couple of years, and to run them at the speeds that I did, at the size of a human being that I am, with Gilbert syndrome, it's probably pretty impossible. And yet, by just being ignorant to that fact, or at least, I don't want to say willfully ignorant, but because I just didn't really know. So it was less willfully ignorant. It allowed me to be on the course that I am today, where I go out there and, like I said, my first I didn't finish my first 100 miler until I had run a 202 miler. So, there's no reason that I should have ran the 202 miler the way I did, considering I had never run more than the 84 miles in that 12-hour race. So ignoring the impossible has kind of been my theme for everything.
Yeah, and I think, Dane, what people do automatically is they shut themselves off to the possibility even before they really even contemplate it. And, and then there's all these scary ideas and thoughts and whatnot as well, too. I remember I got into a debate years ago with a fellow, and he was going on about the pain and the suffering and the agony and all these terms around, around his sport, around ultra racing. And I think I got into a little bit of shit with him as well, too, because I said, I really do think that you're limiting your performance based upon the language that you're using. Because if I talked about public speaking as being terrifying and scary, and I framed it in all these different ways, it's just like putting your hand in fire. That hurts. And I don't care who you are, but putting your hand in fire hurts. And there's a very primitive response in which we pull back and we go, okay, I'm not going to do that. In fact, we sweat, we move away from it. We primitively try to get as far away from that as possible. So sometimes when I end up hearing, athletes talk about the pain and the suffering and the agony, I said, why are we doing this? If it's something that we want to get better at, instead of saying it's the best part of my day, it's joyful, it's purposeful, all these wonderful things, and I love the way that I feel after these things. So that's one of the things that I'm noticing about you, Dane, is that you use some really positive energy and some really positive language around a lot of the goals and a lot of the things that you want to succeed at in life, even though between the three of us and our audience, they're really hard. It is really quite uncomfortable. It can be categorized, even though I don't like talking about running as being painful, it can be pretty painful out there. And so is that something that you coach and teach your athletes about as well too? I'm just reading between the lines with the language that you're using. Is this something that you use with your coaching methods?
Well, running is the only sport that, like, the minute you stop doing it, you're no longer doing it. And by that, I mean, you can play basketball, but you don't have the ball in your hands and you're not even really defending anybody because no one's in your zone, but you're still playing basketball. Mm-hmm. But the minute you're out on a run and you stop running, you're no longer running. And that's what makes running so difficult. Is it's challenging. And so if you focus on that, that's, like you said, that's gonna weigh you down, that like, this is difficult, this is tiring, and I really do focus on, man, how good I feel when I'm done. Just so, I mean, not only mentally better, but obviously physically better. And it's just, I mean, like I said, I live in Texas, and it gets hot here a lot, and I am not good in heat. And I dread a lot of my runs going out into that heat sometimes, because it's just, I mean, I have to put so many bottles of ice water out to just get me through like a 7-miler. But then when I come home, I was telling a friend this just the other day, after my run, shower, and sitting down for like lunch, that is my happiest part of my life, is just that post run glow where I'm about to fill my body with calories and thank it basically for allowing me to get through what I just did. It's fantastic. It's like walking. I really feel sorry when people just flat out say, well, I'm not a runner. And I'm like, oh God, you should really give it a shot, because, and they're like, well, you would say that, you're the guy who ran 52 marathons. I was like, yeah, but I was a competitive swimmer. I boxed Golden Gloves when I was in law school. I played rugby in college. I've done all the sports. So it's not like I popped out of the womb running and never stopped running. That's all I've ever done in my life. It's literally the last sport I've come to. And it's my favorite. So I've tried them all. I mean, I haven't tried cricket, so I have no idea. Maybe cricket's better than running.
It's never too late.
That time. I think there's simplicity in the experience. And, I think that even some part of the sport, we've started to highlight that everyone doesn't have to look the same in running. We don't have to be, 5'9", weigh 120 pounds to be a runner. Dane knows that. And there's other people, and we don't have to run at a certain speed. It's about that experience of getting the body in motion, and there's a neuroscientist in the United States, Andrew Huberman. He's got this podcast plus a Instagram channel. He just talks all about, the neurotransmitters and what happens when we live, and why really do we behave the way we behave, and what is dopamine's role in our success. It's there to sort of instigate and reward, and it's why we feel good. And there are other neurotransmitters that are going to just work better, and then the brain develops more, and then the muscles develop better. And we're the only creature on the planet who improves over time. That's what we do. We're capable of doing that. And so a cow is a cow. They've been the same forever, and a fish, and so on. Evolution sort of ended. And so the part about running is it can sort of crystallize a lot of those at an individual level, which is where power comes for any of us, right? It's one of the best things to prove is to yourself, what you're capable of. And so, yeah, that you found that is what we're always hoping that others find, is, their version of that. It could be, tennis and golf or
Yeah,
running and
absolutely.
swimming.
When people say to me, oh, I don't ever want to run a marathon, that's why I'm not a runner. I'm like, there's a whole bunch of other distances you can run. Like I obviously made a name for myself running marathons, but I wish I lived in a metric country, because I love the 30K. I love that distance, and I've only run it a few times, but it's right on the cusp of kind of being a little bit long, but you could still run it fast. So yeah, you don't have to run a marathon. Run anything. Run down the block and back.
It's a good thing to do. Yeah. So now, as you think about, right, 20 years, some significant accomplishments, we made a joke earlier on, you got your own Wikipedia page, which is always sort of that mark in life. Oh, I made it, because there's enough to talk about. But, do you have a sense of, what you're chasing tomorrow is? What's next for Dane? I mean, because you got lots of years left, but where's your imagination taking you?
I mean, I have no shortage of not only races that I'd like to run, but also kind of like stunt runs that I'd like to do, run across the country or something like that. That really just comes down to finding like the time and the crew that can go with me, and that sort of thing. I have more ideas than I have money. That's the thing. But I'm actually, kind of pivoting in a little bit. I'm currently working on a new app for runners that I think is going to be really revolutionary. And so, I've was very fortunate to become friends with both Bill Rogers and Dave McGilvery, the Boston Marathon race director, many years ago, and saw how, I don't know if they planned it this way, but I think they, especially elite runners like Bill, they knew they weren't going to be elite forever. And so they like kind of pivoted into how they could keep running in their life for the rest of their life. Right. And I mean, Dave started his sports management business when he was, I think, in his 20s. I mean, his foresight was amazing. And that's what I'm really trying to do, is try to make running part of my life forever in as many different ways as I can. And fortunately, I've worked expos in so many different ways, from speaking to I've done race directing. I've done as much as I can. I've dabbled in it all, kind of like with the races that I do myself. So I'm hoping to just continue to evolve with the sport. It's definitely changed a great deal, even in the past 20 years that I've been running, and I've tried to evolve with it, and trying to see how I can stay relevant, as well as trying to continue to challenge myself. I mean, I mapped out a run that would circumvent the United States. So it would basically be a marathon a day for 365 straight days. And I would love to do that. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but there's stuff like that I've got planned out. And I mean, I would love to just, everywhere I want to, someone says, hey, do you want to run in this place? I'm like, yes, I do. Like, where is that? I don't care where that place is. Yes, I want to run there. And I want to experience as much as I possibly can. That's really what I want to do.
Well, it's a beautiful way to end. And you're now in our community, and you got Dave Proctor over here who can help you figure out how to run across the country, because he's one of the best multi-day runners that the world knows. And
You're too kind.
Yeah, and we're gonna keep track of you, Dane. We're really happy, just for our listeners. The way we got to know Dane was one of our listeners recommended. We always say at the end of the show, if you know someone you think should be on, one of the people you coach felt strongly about you, because it's always hard to know everyone, but we're really thankful for getting to meet you and getting to spend some time with you. And just think of us as part of your crew someday, and we'll be out there with you.
Well, I've heard people say that ultra runners are the most welcoming people, and I quibble with that. I just say runners. I really don't. I've never met a community of people, and I've been in most of them, who are so usually welcoming to us, because we've all we've all been there. We've all failed. We've all had wonderful days. We've all had things go right, go wrong. And, you know, until you own the world record, every single person I just think it's amazing that the sport, what it does and what it brings together with people. And so it's a pleasure to be a part of your community as well. And I appreciate, you know, having me on.
Yeah, this has been wonderful, Dane. Thanks a lot.
Yes, we'll talk to you
Absolutely.
soon. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.